Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes. Of course, you can find us on bluebearflutes.com and Blue Bear Flutes on Instagram and Facebook and here, of course, on YouTube. You might see us some places as Blue Bear Arts, as that has been part of our business in the past, and this is what we are today. Making our first video in our new workshop, which I don't know if you've watched many of our other videos. I've tried not to pull a lot of them down for aesthetic purposes, but we came quite a ways before we got to this one. Many of you in the past had complained about being able to hear me or what have you, and the audio quality of some of our settings and environments in the past weren't as necessarily conducive to making videos. But now we're in a new workshop, and it currently, until we get the walls up, sounds like a big hall. It's got a good audio timbre to it, I guess I'd say. Anyway, today's video on making Native American flutes is going to be making one out of a material I've been saving for a time. As a matter of fact, it's set in storage and in my old workshop, even at the time that it started raining in the roof and what have you, and it gotten a little bit of mold down here in the bottom, but that's not a problem. We'll cut away from that. This is a cutting board. Just a run-of-the-mill cutting board. I'm not suggesting you buy this brand or anything of that sort. I'm not sure if you can even find it. A lot of times cutting boards, like anything, are something that are overlooked and people don't think about what you can do with it otherwise. But this cutting board's made out of bamboo, and it's got a really nice design on it where they've cut bamboo, and the bamboo's actually that thick, which is about a ½ inch, I'd say. It's a really nice looking cutting board, but the bamboo's got this pattern on it that I just really loved, and I thought, hey, you know, that would make a really cool looking flute. So what I'm going to do is going to cut out some of the wood from the cutting board in hopefully a design that I think will make a nice looking flute. Then we're going to put it together and turn it and see what happens. It should make a good sounding flute as well, because it is made out of a very hard piece of bamboo. Obviously it is a cutting board. Cutting boards, once again, come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and textures and colors and different types of laminations and all kinds of things to look into. So if you are a Native American flute maker or have become one in recent years, and your skill level is enough that you feel comfortable using tools like these, which is what it would take to cut into some of this kind of stuff, you know, it might be a good idea to look into cutting boards. There's something really unique and unusual, and here we are. So the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is unwrap this guy. Of course, if it's got mold inside of it, some of the wrappings have come off already, but we need to take the plastic off of it. It's got a really nice texture to it too. I like the way it feels. You know, of course, cutting boards aren't the only place that you're going to go to find a unique material to make something out of. And no telling any of the other things that you can do with this or that you could make out of it. It's very dry too. If it were me and I were going to use it as a cutting board, which obviously we're not, I'd probably want to soak it in like some olive oil or something, or maybe some of that cutting board finish that they sell. A lot of your retail hardware stores have just a number of different materials. Of course too, I don't know with the laminate if the oil will destroy its cohesion, if it make it come apart. Any which way, let's make a flute out of it. Okay, so I'm going to actually find some of the grain here where they've laminated it together at the factory, and I'm going to make my flute out of the middle of this grain. I don't know, you know, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe the holes being on this line, the seam here, is not going to be good, but I just feel like, you know, the symmetry of the design that they have on here, it's probably going to be best to do it that way. Just my opinion. So we'll make the front and the back using the center of one of these lines. And I'm not worried about the mold here. It'll come off in the planer, I'm sure. It should be only on the surface. Of course, if it molds now, if you were using it as a cutting board, just an idea. So I'm going to mark this. This is my key of A flute pattern. It's just a pattern that I use, and it looks like I'm offset just a smidgen. Probably could have done that just a little bit better. I'll give you the measurements of this blank in just a second. It's not completely necessary that you have the measurements of this piece of the puzzle. A lot of people have asked me with regards to my book, why don't you have the size of your blanks? Well, that's really, the size of your blank is really up to you. The thing that's most important is the inside of the flute, not how big the outside is. To me, the outside is important because how thick the flute is determines the quality of the tone of the flute. So if you make a flute that has a wall that's, say, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, kind of like we do, it may produce one tone. And if you make that same flute out of the same wood and same everything, and then make it with, say, a 3/8 inch thick wall, it's going to produce a different tone. And that's because of how much the sound waves get absorbed into the material. So that's something to think about when you're making a pattern like this. But just to give you the measurements, like I say, this right here isn't the most important part. A lot of you think, yeah, that's exactly what I need, but it's not. You could make your blank this wide if you're going to make it a different size and diameter, or if you're going to turn more of it off. Maybe your lathe skills are not as adept. So we're looking at almost 1 1/4 inches. And let me count the 16ths here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 16ths. Is that right? Yep, that's right. Nope. 7 16ths is not below a quarter. Those must be 30 seconds, excuse me. So it's 7 32nds. 1 7 32nds inches. That's a little bitty guy for width-wise, but for a key of A flute it's perfect. And then the length of this one is 18 inches. And does it matter if it's 18 and 3 32nds? No, because the pattern that I use here is used to make both A flat, A432, key of A B flat, and a A528 hertz flute. So you have a couple of different A's we make out of this, and honestly, for a key of A440, we're probably going to wind up cutting it off right about there, but just FYI. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set my guide. I don't know if you guys have ever been introduced to my guide here. Lost one to my old table saw forever ago, and I say lost it, I mean it broke. I tried to find a real quick makeshift solution for this, and this is just a plywood cutting guide to use with a radial saw. It is pretty good. I think that's about it. There we go. So let's lop this a little bit off first. Okay, so I went ahead and cut 2 out there. Not sure if my lines were going to promote cutting the right width, so I was just using this guy as a guide. Like I said, the width of your blank is only minorly critical. So let's see. I think as long as they're the same, I'm going to go ahead and use them as they are. I know I've got a little offset over here, but I can probably take care of that. Let me see. So I've got a little wider on this one, and narrower here, and narrower and wider. Maybe I will try cutting one more out. I think maybe I'll just eyeball it this time. It usually produces a better thin and a thick side, but it gave me a little bit more meat to work with. Originally I thought about making a drone flute out of this other piece, but it looks like I may not have enough left over to do that, which is not a problem. Let's see, so using my pattern here, let's see if we can find us a good center. I guess we could figure out what the center of this is first. I said it was 1 inch and 7/32. So we're just going to figure out what 1/2 of 1 inch and 7/32 is. I say it's right about there. Hope you guys like my measurements today. A lot of times I tell people that it's about this or about that, and I don't know if any of you ever caught that note that I had mentioned. My granddad told me how to find the placement of the fingerings, and I mentioned that in a couple of videos where he first told me how to find the fingerings on a 4-hole whistle. He says you just put them where you want to. I'll be doggone. Usually it's right. There are some areas where we need to have things precise and perfect, and you have very little wiggle room. But a lot of times, overthinking a situation really destroys the beauty of it. Hopefully that's close. It's a really neat looking design. I'm kind of wondering if maybe I should spend some of this material here on making a flute totem out of it. I bet that would be cool. So I wiggled a little bit here to give myself an extra 2 millimeters or so worth of room, and it looks like it's just about perfectly centered, which might mean when I shave it, it's going to be a little thin on one side. Maybe I'll just do 1 millimeter at a time. Now this is something I didn't think about. This leads me to a whole nother idea. If I have one side going up and one side going down, that looks really cool. I wonder if it's going to look better. Of course, that gives us this wonderful, like tic-tac-toe or checkers pattern on the side. No telling what it's going to be when it turns. But let's see what happens if I go this way with the waterfall going in the same direction on this pattern. That lines them up. And that looks pretty cool too. It is really hard to decide on this one. I'm going to ask the camera person, what do you think? Mix them up? Okay. Mix them up it is. So that's about it there. Now one thing I'm really kind of afraid of is running this through my planer. And I think what I should do is test it on one of my scrap pieces first. Because a lot of times, any of you that have a planer know, the ones of you that don't, may not realize, but when you throw something through a planer, if it's got a crack or like a piece hanging off of the end, or if it's laminated in this particular way, sometimes the planer will gobble it up. So it'll spit out chunks of everything. I'm going to run this test piece through the planer and see how it works. I did test my little 1/8 inch thick piece here. It's got a little bit of a spring to it. I don't know if you heard that crack, but it's Sounds like it's got a weak spot in there, but the glue is great. So I'm going to run this through the planer and see what we have. We'll open up some valves and get that going. Okay, I would like to mention too that I always try to promote good habits, and a lot of you that may not own a planer see me sticking my hand through the open body of this one here. I've had several planers that the open body is just wide open, and it gives me the opportunity to reach onto the other side and grab my wood. I never stick my hand inside of this thing. Oh God, no. I've actually got 4 close friends who have lost parts because of this. One of them actually lost it in a hydraulic press, and one of them lost them on a joiner planer, which is an open-faced planer. Like this, the blades are on the bottom and you can see them moving. You could actually stick your hand across it, as my good friend did. Oh gosh, I tell you what, scary stuff. And then another good friend had his hand go inside of here by accident, and yet another lost it on a metal planer, which is a whole another type of tool. But you know, it's a scary thing having a tool this powerful here with you. But knowing how it works and knowing what your limitations are is very important. I never stick a hand in there. As a matter of fact, you'll almost always find a little block of wood laying here on my planer that I use to push something through if I can't make it through. Just don't ever stick your hand in one of these. It will take anything you stick in there off of your body. Don't do it. And here, like I said, this is all open body cavity. It's kind of, there's no blades on this one up here. I do have another good woodworker friend who's also an engineer, and he's very good at what he does woodworking wise. Engineering, I suppose too. I've never got to see that, but his woodworking skills are beyond parfait. They're really great. But his planer is an old school type, and you can't stick your hands in it either, because even though it's like this, it's a top rotor planer, there are open parts of the planer blades up here on the top. You just don't want to do that. His is of course a little lower too, which is handy. Mine, because of the size and space in our shop, I have to keep it to where I can use it like this. And anyway, so that's my soapbox for the day. Good news is, it played this sucker here down really nice and smooth. Looks great. I think it's going to be an excellent material for making flutes out of. And just for the heck of it, I might go ahead and send these 2 good pieces I'm going to use. My test come out pretty good, but I'm going to go ahead and send these 2 good pieces through the planer to just clean them up a smidgen. Okay, so there we go. Nice and smooth surface. The sides of this are incredibly sharp, by the way. It's almost like I could get a paper cut from just touching the side walls of this material. These are going to be my mating surfaces, so it's going to go together like this. As per the camera person, I think it'll make a really beautiful pattern, one side going down, the other side going up, and the side giving you that wonderful checkerboard kind of design. We'll see what that looks like when it turns round. It's going to be something different, but this gives us some good variety. And I also have enough material, like I said, to make not only a flute totem out of, but I could even use it if I wanted to make another flute like this and see what happens the other way. But that'll be a project for a different day. This is a big undertaking. So, using my book, The Art of Native American Flute Making, what we're looking for here is the key of A flute. This is a 5-hole key of A flute. And here are the placements for the fingerings: 5 3/16, 6 5/16, 7 1/2, 8 11/16, 9 15/16, and the end, which is the distance from the bottom of the flute to the sound hole, to the back edge of the sound hole, is looking at 13 1/2. Now, having said all that, these measurements are really kind of, they're not guesstimates, they're estimates. They're close to the right location. Depending on how the inside of your flute looks and how your track and your sound hole look and how you do a lot of things, these measurements might be off one place or another. Most of you think, like I would, that sound dissipates at an even rate. So that means that if something happens that you change that, it's only going to affect all the holes or none of the holes. You wouldn't think that it would only affect the top 2, but it does. So there are things you can do to the track, for example, that may not affect the bottom note of the flute with all holes covered, but it'll affect the first 3 from the bottom and may not affect the top 2. So it just depends on how the sound is traveling and what's being done internally to the flute. And so I give you these measurements. Like I say, they're close. They're precise. They're not exact. So that's why if we make a 5 3/16 hole, it may be 5/16 of an inch in diameter versus these holes down here, which are usually going to wind up being about 1/4 of an inch. The important thing right now is I want to show you the inside diameter is 9/16. I am using a 9/16 core box router bit, and that's what's going to make the hole in the inside of this. I've also got to set the depth so that it is about half of 9/16. I do this so often I just about do it in my sleep, but I want to show you what half of 9/16 is. And yes, I'm using metric for those of you who are saying, I thought he was going to show me standard measurements. We do most everything in the shop in here with a mixture of standard and metric. And too much. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. See if that's too much. Here we go. 9.5 millimeters is about half of 9/16. And so that's going to create a gouge in the bottom of this flute that is half of the diameter, so that when you put 2 of those together, that it'll make the full circle diameter. And then we'll clean the inside up with a little bit of something. I've got to set this guide. You're welcome to watch me route it. Some of this stuff might get boring. You've probably seen it over again, but at least we'll catch some small clips of it, I'm sure. I think that turned out pretty good. It's going to make an amazing looking flute. A lot of times, well, 99.9% of the times, the next step is going to be burn the inside of this flute after, of course, we drill our holes and what have you. But burning the inside of this may affect the glue that's on it. And I'm wondering if maybe I should even bother doing that, or if I should just sand it really nice or what have you. In either case, I do need to go ahead and mark my fingerings, and we'll get it going in the right direction here before we glue it. Okay, so I went ahead and just lightly burned it a little bit, and then I lightly sanded it on the inside, which made it to where I'm not afraid to run my finger through it like this, because it was incredibly sharp. Like I said, the edges over here are something else. But the inside of it now is very slick and smooth, and I'm kind of getting excited to see what it's going to look like when it's round and glassy and, glossy but oiled, because like I said, I'm not going to use lacquer on it. And see how it plays, because its playing is going to be amazing. I'm thinking I might need to go get a bigger cutting board. But this is it's going to be kind of a neat undertaking, and makes me want to go searching for other materials that I can do this with. So let's go ahead and get some of this glue here going.